everyone, Mark Johnston here with our High Thrive Live, our weekly live stream on how to fix your marriage. So this week what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of give a good overview on a question that I know a lot of you have been asking, and that is, how do you get your partner back? You know, if they are out the door, if they're ready to leave, what do you do? And I just wanted to give that the broad, you know, the plan here. And I know there are probably some of you out there that have probably heard something similar, especially if you've gotten on one of our free consultation calls. I do go over more or less many of these steps in that, but I do want to spell it out because there are some, usually in these sort of situations, there are some logical barriers. There's some things that are getting in the way, and I don't think everyone quite gets all the little pieces that need to be put back into place. So you might see I actually have a little bit of a visual aid here. It's, you know, I'm terrible at drawing, and my handwriting might be atrocious, but bear with me here. So with that, here's some. I'm going to be showing some steps. Now, of course, with each of these, there's a lot of smaller parts to each of these steps. But like I said, I wanted to give you a bit of an overview. So, nothing much here yet, just a few words. With all this, what is normally happening in a situation like this is, you know, someone's heading out the door and they're saying to themselves, okay, I'm not going to come back. So my first question here is, okay, what's missing in these situations? And pretty reliably, we can guess at a few things. You know, one, we can guess that, you know, a lot of trust or certainty or safety or comfort is lost in these situations. Because of that, it makes it hard to connect. And these things kind of cascade. One problem affects the next one. So trust, without that, it becomes hard to, you know, have a little excellent. It becomes hard to have that connection or value or enjoyment within the relationship. Because after all, if you aren't comfortable around each other, how do you enjoy each other's company? With that, and then if we get to this point, if we don't have any of that connection, if we don't have any of that enjoyment, it becomes what I tend to see happen is people tend to invest less into their relationship. You know, people really put the time, they put the effort into a situation that they value. And what we tend to see is, you know, when that value starts to lessen, their investment starts to lessen as well. Their commitment starts to lessen, and subsequently, we start seeing, because of all that, we start, you know, losing some amount of love, that longing to be together. You just start feeling more of an indifference, and that further cascades, and when we don't have that longing, that spark, that love anymore, there just really isn't that commitment. And so here we have the things that are lost. And within, you know, but we're talking about a situation where someone is already starting to head out the door. We have lost these things. Now, with all of this, we can also, you know, reasonably say that these are the things that we need to put back into place in a certain order. If I then, for instance, you know, and this is where I see a lot of problems in this situation. If I were, for instance, you know, starting to aim right down here at commitment. Your partner's out the door and you're begging them to stay. You're begging them to work on things. How effective is it going to be to ask for that commitment? We're asking for this this higher level thing when we don't have the foundation in place. And we can see this is a lot of the reason why this sort of the begging, the pleading to work on things when these other pieces are missing, why that tends to push the partner away. Why things don't work is because we're asking for things like love and commitment when really the big focus at that moment really needs to be about trust and safety and comfort. Now, if I just left you there, I mean, that would be some good information, but I want to take it a step up from that. So within each of these, what I tend to see are layered problems, and what I tend to also see is, at the deeper levels are these big problems. Um, we tend to see things like, okay, maybe a wife who's heading out the door, she says, okay, me and myself, I'm just unlovable. My husband doesn't care for me. I'm not important to him. These are some really big, major issues, and it's just really hard to get to actually attack that line of thinking until we eliminate some of these other layers. Usually, though, at the surface, we are seeing some other problems. We've seen much easier problems to address. Things, these are things like it's really difficult to have a conversation. Right there is an obstacle to you actually building up trust again. I mean, if you can't talk together, if you can't actually talk about the problem, how do you fix it? And we have, in my mind, what is generally a more minor obstacle. But if we don't take care of that obstacle and we just try to plow through, it tends to blow up in your face. We try to say, okay, let's work on that. Let's just keep hammering in on the fact that she doesn't, we had this affair and there's just no trust anymore. You keep trying to hit at that when you can't even have a simple conversation. It's just not going to work. So within each of these problems, we need to eliminate the easier obstacles. Then we can get to some of those more minor obstacles before we can get to the eliminate the big obstacles. As a practical example, I'm thinking of a situation right here. I remember a client that I was working with, and there was a big breach in trust, not in any sort of infidelity or fair sort of way, but there was a big financial breach of trust, and the wife just didn't trust the client that I was working with. So that was, if we're talking about like big mountains of problems, and like I said, my drawing is terrible. That was the big obstacle way off in the distance. In front of that, we had some walls. Terrible drawing here. We had some walls. We had issues like they're having all these fights and all this tension, and even in front of that we had just kind of some minor walls that it was even hard to nail down any sort of time together to talk or to be together. And so in this sort of case, we had to deal with this, and I found out that the wife really didn't. She felt uncomfortable having these discussions about the relationship. So we had to figure out, okay, what was going on there and address that. And then we could get rid of that obstacle. Once we got rid of that obstacle, it was much easier to address some of the things in the middle, like the fact that, like I was saying before, the fact that, they were having all these fights, and there's these big blow-ups. So then we could deal with that. Why were there these big blow-ups? What was going on there? And we could eliminate that obstacle. And then we could now start approaching this big problem of trust. So in that situation, we ended up, because we had set the stage, because we had taken all the steps beforehand, approaching that mountain became a lot easier. It became this situation where they could talk about trust, and they could come up with plans, and they could come up with some ways to feel that safety. And this was no longer an obstacle to their relationship anymore. At that point, because things felt so much more safe, they were able to start getting out on dates. They were able to start hanging out and watching movies together. And the connection wasn't a problem anymore. At that point, a strange thing started happening. Is my client, his wife, actually wanted to be around him, would reach out to him, and actually would talk about missing him. And that love right there wasn't a problem anymore. And after that, became easier to actually say, you know what, I really want to work on this. I want let's plan for a future together. Things are really good. And that commitment, her desire to have that divorce was gone, and they actually were happy. And we were able to eliminate that obstacle. But, I think I tend to look at these problems, at relationships. I think I see things a little bit differently than most. I tend to look at this thing as a very almost mechanical sort of situation. We have different pieces in place and they affect other pieces. But, in my mind, there is a reasonable way to approach these sort of situations in a not simple, but at least straightforward path to resolving some of these issues. As always, if you have any questions, I would love to hear. I see some of you are chiming in, saying hello. Hi, Brian. Hi, Diane. I might not have seen it a moment ago. I had my notes up for a bit, but I know how hard this must be. You're in this situation where you've created a life with someone else. You maybe you've been together 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, however many years, but you've created a life with this other person, and now it seems like it's all coming down, crashing around you. And so I get it. I get the fear, desperation, all the things that you might do to try and hold on to that so tightly. And even some of the confusion that you might have, like there's, what do you do in these situations? So I hope this was helpful in clearing out some of that confusion. And I understand there's many other approaches that people might have, but this is what I've found has worked. As I've focused in on this specific problem within marriages. So, as always, if you have any questions, let us know. Put a comment down below. I'm not seeing any quite yet, but I will check on this a little bit later today. And we do like to give as much support as we can here. So, thank you all for watching. I wish you the best of luck in having a thriving and happy marriage, and we'll see each other next week.